Alright guys, my name is MetaGoblin and today I'm going to be giving you my top 10 tips and tricks for playing a hunter in Classic WoW. By the way, thanks to all my subscribers who gave me suggestions on my community post a day ago. Just before we jump in, please do give me a quick follow on Twitch, as when the game comes out I will be streaming over on Twitch. So I've got a few good tips for you in this video. Most are actually macros, since if you really want to master the hunter class, first of all you have to get yourself some good macros and then you have to learn how to use them properly. Okay, just to clarify, these macros will be a little bit different when Classic has been released because they will probably be a lot simpler to actually write into the text window, but nonetheless they will be updated in the description in the video anyway. Okay, and I've not covered pet leveling in this video that much, because I've covered that extensively in other videos, but nonetheless we do actually talk about pets quite a bit in this video as well because it's just unavoidable. Anyway, finally, let's jump into the video. So my first tip is probably the coolest on the list, and this is my Feign Death and Shadowmeld macro. So Shadowmeld in vanilla can only be used out of combat, but in retail it functions as a kind of a worse version of Vanish, since it can be used in combat and will actually break combat and reset mobs and stuff like that, and to enemy players you will just be undetectable. But if you're in combat, right, and you use Feign Death, for a brief moment you will be out of combat, okay, after using Feign Death. It doesn't matter if you're in a group, it doesn't matter if your pet is attacking, or even if you're in a PvP situation. It's a little bit harder, granted, when you have dots on yourself, but anyway, personally I find this macro very useful in 1v1 situations, right? You can pop Viper Sting on your enemy and use this macro to basically do a mini Vanish. The enemy will just be totally confused as to how a hunter has managed to become randomly stealthed in combat, right? And they might even run away and think that you've disconnected or something. Either way, they're going to have to enter melee range to find you again to break your stealth, by which time you could have got a full Viper Sting off or a Serpent Sting to drain their health or to drain their mana a little bit. So yeah, just an overall good trick to trick your enemy and get a little head in a 1v1 situation. So my second tip is a quick one. I feel a bit stupid, honestly, that I've only just found this out, but you can drag food from your bags onto your pet frame or just the actual pet model itself, and he will just start eating it. So you don't have to manually press the feed pet on your action bars and then hover it over food in your bags. So anyway, that's just a quick one. I can't believe I didn't actually know this until quite recently, so that obviously saves quite a bit of time. Our third tip is another macro, and it's an all-in-one melee macro. You can just spam this button and it does all your melee DPS sorted out for you, since it will cast every single melee ability available to you and basically initiate your auto attack as well. I would recommend keeping the other abilities on the bars, just so you know when they have become available, because they only become available after dodges and parries, counterattack and Mongoose Bite. And then rearrange the abilities in the macro depending on what priority you want the abilities to be. Next, I have a quick trick for you to get the best arrows in the game very easily. There is a quest in either where you get it from Artilleryman Sheldonair in Ironforge or Bounty Hunter Kollark in Orgrimmar, so it's one for each faction. Basically you can exchange thorium bullets for thorium arrows, and thorium bullets are easily crafted by an engineer, and these arrows provide the highest ammo DPS apart from Doom Shot and miniature cannonballs, which are only drop from a limited amount from bosses. So basically these arrows are the best in the game. For our fifth tip, I'd recommend you get an auto shot timer add-on. It's kind of like a swing timer add-on but for ranged weapons. The reason we get this add-on is because you can move between your auto attacks without losing DPS and gain distance on your enemy. Whether you're counting a mob or in a PvP situation, this is extremely useful, particularly before level 10, as you just won't simply have a pet. So the idea is that you can strafe between your auto shots to maximise your distance and make sure the enemy is not getting to you in melee range. For my sixth tip, I have a quick one which will stop people from hating you on your server. So always dismiss your pet before a jump. Whenever you have to jump off any form of ledge in an instance, always dismiss your pet. The reason we do this is because pets are basically dumb. Hunters aren't really dumb, pets are just dumb. The reason why hunters have this huntard stigma is because you essentially have a scripted NPC tagging along with you on your adventures, and if you don't babysit that pet with proper macros and proper control, it will just cause absolute chaos. Okay, it's easy to forget that you have to dismiss the pet before you jump off a ledge, because otherwise the pet will have to find a manual path to your location, which might mean he will run halfway around a dungeon before he finally gets back to you with 2,500 mob packs behind him. So yeah, always remember to dismiss your pet. While on the topic of not irritating people in your group, you're going to have to learn how to play with your pet constantly on passive. With pet attack macros and pet chill macros, basically that's what I call them anyway. This pet attack macro will make your pet attack your current target, but also cast dash and charge if they're available to him, just to get him to the target faster. The pet chill macro will make your pet run back to you, but also cast dash to speed him up to your location. You may also want to get yourself to just get familiar with a pet stay macro as well, which has a number of uses. It can camp a mob spawn, it can be used to charge an enemy player, you know, when he's spell casting, for instance, to interrupt it. It can also be used to avoid certain raid mechanics and stuff like that. Overall, you want to be in total manual control of when your pet attacks, just to stop him causing chaos. And also, obviously, always take pet growl off, because that's another thing that's going to irritate people. Next, we're going to talk about pet defense. If you don't know how to train your pets properly, they're just going to die all the time in raids. This means you need to give them good stamina stats and resistance stats through your training window, right? Because there's certain abilities that you can give to your pet to give them a little bit of an extra boost, right? Your pet gains training points based on its loyalty level and its current level. So a level 60 pet at max loyalty should always have 300 training points. And the only way to get pet loyalty is to basically just keep your pets out and wait around and do nothing, but obviously keep him fed. But since you only have 300 training points, you have to be smart about how you spend them. Spending venom on armor, for instance, is pretty useless in raids, because the boss won't be attacking your pet, so you don't need melee damage mitigation. Most non-tank damage inflicted in raids is going to be magic damage, so you'll be better off training your pet with a high stamina buff and a higher magic resistance buff. The magic resistance buff will depend on what kind of content you're clearing. Now, for instance, for Molten Core, you're probably going to want to go for fire resistance, and maybe in Zul'Gurub you might want to go for poison nature resistance. But when you yeah, pretty much just covered that. I was getting ahead of myself in the script there. But anyway, let's move on to the next point. For number 9, I want to talk about aggro. This will be more of a leveling tip. So, certain abilities and damage patterns are going to generate more aggro than others. It's normally better to do steady damage in order to ensure that your pet maintains aggro. So my recommendation will be to get your pet into combat, let him get a growl off, and probably one melee hit. Then you use Serpent Sting, right? You use that first because it doesn't generate a lot of aggro. And when you wait until the target is about 75 to 50% before you start finishing off with arcane shots, right? But you have to kind of feel the waters. You may be able to use arcane shot a little bit earlier, fair enough, because your pet is good at generating aggro. You've deeper spec into the beast mastery tree, which means your pets do more damage, which is better getting at aggro. Maybe you can do a little bit more damage in the opener with arcane shots and stuff. You have to experiment and find that sweet spot, because you do not want the enemy target running towards you, right? Because that's going to waste a lot of time. But if that does happen, again, go back to your kiting technique with the swing timer add-on that I recommended earlier. Put a concussive shot on him and just strafe between auto shots. But if it isn't safe to kite, I'd always recommend going into melee range, smacking him up with the melee macro that I gave you earlier as well. Lastly, I want to finish off with a little bit of a trick that's more well known than the others, and that is the generic Feign Death trap macro. Basically, it works the same as a Shadowmeld macro at the start of the video, which by the way can also be applied to Wyvern Sting. Basically, you feign death, and for a brief moment you're out of combat, as I told you earlier, which means you can use your trap or any other ability that requires you to be out of combat. My advice will be to get yourself as close to your enemy as possible before you use the trap, practically push yourself into the character model of the enemy player or the enemy target, and then use the macro so that that trap instantly explodes in their face. If you're using a freezing trap macro, it is important to note that you want to make sure you have a pet follow and a pet passive macro, basically a pet chill macro, attached to the freezing trap macro, so it will stop your pet from auto-attacking the target that you just trapped and, breaking the trap, because that is a, pretty classic hunter noob mistake that you want to avoid. Anyway guys, that's the end of the top 10 tips for Hunter. My name is Goblin. Until my next video, ciao.